Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to let everyone make their way into the meeting and then we're going to get going. All right. Well, welcome. I'm Barb McKittrick. Welcome to one of our Nature Virtually Everywhere programs. At the Forest Preserve, we started to pivot at the beginning of the pandemic and offer quite a few virtual programs in addition to whatever we can do out in the field. Now that we're in Tier 3, we're able to welcome people back into our nature center here at Creek Bend in St. Charles, and we can take groups of 50 outside. So a lot of our hiking and outside environmental education programs are back on, but a lot of folks have started to like these virtual programs. You can do them on your lunch hour. You can do them from home in the evenings. If you're challenged in certain ways, you can join us here, even if you're not able to walk with us outside. So these are not going to be going away, even after everyone is allowed to go back to work and socialize and be with people again. So this particular program is about my hiking experience on the Appalachian Trail 2 years ago now, when times were different. And I'm glad you're joining me to hear about that. Be with you for about an hour. Just a couple of little housekeeping things. I did want to tell you that we are recording the program, and that way folks that couldn't be here today can view it. The video will be posted on our YouTube channels as of tomorrow. So for that reason, I have muted everyone upon entry. You have the ability to unmute, but it's probably best to keep it off for quality of sound purposes. And I see everyone, I think everyone has turned their video off, which is a good idea unless you want your picture to be included in the videotaping of today's program. You probably don't. So go ahead and keep those cameras off. And if you have questions, I'd love to be able to address them at the end of the presentation through the chat room. So those of you who aren't familiar with Zoom, although most people by now have used it frequently for work and staying in touch with their family, if you hover your cursor down at the bottom of the screen, a menu pops up, and one of the menu items down there is chat. So if you click on that, it will bring up the chat window and you can type a message. I'm just saying hi all. So you'll see that, you'll see me corresponding with you, and you can leave your messages in there, and then I'll get to those at the end of the program. So go ahead and put them in there when they pop into your mind, and then we'll get to them at the end. I think that's it from a housekeeping standpoint. We branded this series of virtual programs Nature Virtually Everywhere. So let's jump into the Appalachian Trail virtually. Share my screen with you. All right. So first off, let me say that this was something I had wanted to do for years. And I'm so glad that I finally took the time and did the training to go out and experience what is one of the premier hiking trails in the United States. We have a number of them across the country now. The AT is the oldest and the one that seems to be the most famous. But others, a lot of you have heard of the Pacific Crest Trail, and that is in California mainly. And the movie with Reese Witherspoon made that trail famous, Wild. But there are others as well. The longest one is actually under construction now, and that is the trail that will be going from South Dakota all the way to the East Coast. It's the North Country Trail. Part of it goes through Wisconsin. The Appalachian Trail, though, is the oldest of them, of our national trails. So it was a real wilderness experience. Let me show you some pictures and give you some stories and hopefully let you experience what it would be like and maybe even plan your own trip to the AT. So it was 2 years ago that I went, and I went in May, which was a great time to be on the section that I was. I do want to clarify, I did not hike the entire Appalachian Trail, although many people do. I did what's called a section hike. So a lot of folks end up conquering the whole trail one section at a time. So this is my first section, and in the years that I have left, I may be able to do more, although after doing this one section, I was pretty convinced that I really don't want to do the entire trail. It's a big time commitment, and there's so many other places to see in the world, but your choice will be up to you. So here's a little background on the AT. It is long. It's just under 2,200 miles long, running through 14 states on the East Coast. It starts, the southern terminus is in Georgia at Springer Mountain, and the northern terminus is up in Maine, Mount Katahdin. And that northern section of the trail is very mountainous. It goes through, the bottom is, the Appalachian Range has many names in different sections, but they're all Appalachian mountains, really. So as you get farther north, you enter into what's called the Blue Ridge Mountains, but that's part of the Appalachian Mountain Range too. And then even farther north than that is the White Mountains, but all technically Appalachian. Because it's the Appalachian Trail through the Appalachian Mountains, there's quite a bit of elevation gain and loss. It is not a flat trail by any means. They say that if you were to hike the entire trail, the 2,200 miles, you would be in effect scaling Mount Everest 16 times because the up and down, the elevation gains and loss are about 465,000 feet. A lot of wear on the feet, and a need to bring a lot of Band-Aids for blisters. Because of the length and the difficulty in hiking the trail, it's not like there are hundreds of thousands of people that have done a through hike from one end to the other. There's only been about 15,000. Usually takes them from 5 to 7 months. Some people have actually run the trail, and it might be quicker then, and it is. So there's been all kind of craziness lately, but 5 to 7 months is typical. So you can see that the demographic that's out there on the trail tends to be retired people who have 5 to 7 months on their hands, or recent college graduates, or young people who have just gotten out of school. So that's who you mainly see out there. Typical hike, through hike, starts in the south and goes north. So it starts in Georgia in April when it's not so blistering hot down there, and then travels north and it needs to finish up by October before the big snows hit up in Maine. So that's typical, although not required. You can hike whichever direction you'd like, but that makes the most sense. And since it's tough, about 25% of people who start actually complete the hike. But I did not do the whole hike. I did this section. I did a 50-mile section along the Tennessee-North Carolina border. But you can see there was quite a bit of elevation change on this section too. It wasn't chosen because it was flat. I'll tell you a little bit about why we chose this section, but it was challenging. There was some days there were 2,000-foot elevation gains, so it was plenty tough. The section that we did, as I mentioned, was a 50-mile trek. And I keep saying we, I went with a group. Some people do it solo. Some people go with their significant other. I chose to go with a group of, there were 8 of us, with someone who was an experienced guide, just because I felt most comfortable in such a long backpacking experience, my first one, going with a guide. You don't have to. We had a plan to cover 50 miles in the Cherokee National Forest. This is just north of Great Smoky Mountains National Park, where I have been many times, and I knew I loved that area of the country. I love the topography, and I like the trees and the biodiversity there. So it's also the salamander capital of the world. So it had a lot of things going for it. We started at a place called Carver's Gap, which is near Irwin, Tennessee. You can see that on the map there, right on the left side of that red circle. And we hiked north, kind of through that looped area to a place called Dennis Cove, also in Tennessee. It was a 6-day and 5-night trip. And for me, that was about perfect. 6 days, if you're not used to being out in the wilderness without a shower, without cleaning up, it can seem like a bit of a long time, although no one else is either. So you all kind of blend together after a while. I didn't so much mind sleeping on the hard ground. A lot of people don't like that. But to me, that was great. It was good enough time to be away from home. I'm used to being out on trips, but this is the first time that I took a long backpacking trip. So it's definitely doable if you've not done it before. When we arrived, the 6 days were due to begin early. Every day began early. You don't sleep in when you're on the Appalachian Trail. So our trip was due to depart at 5 a.m. I think it was on a Monday. So we wanted to arrive. There were 3 of us traveling together. I had a good friend. Her name is Lisa, and my stepdad went with me. So it was really great for me to experience this with those 2. We met beforehand the evening before and stayed at this very luxurious bed and breakfast. And it was luxurious by trail standards because we had a nice soft bed and a hot shower, a porch to relax on. So we hung out here at Oz's cabin and got ready for meeting up the next morning. Started having some second thoughts when I was just relaxing on the hammock outside of that Airbnb and looking at the trail, which was running through that foggy, very intimidating looking range of mountains that you see in front of you there. And that's what I was seeing and thinking, do I really want to do that? Do I just want to stay here in this hammock? But even though it wasn't encouraging, I was lucky to be with friends, and we were psyched to get out there and do our trip despite the intimidating scene in front of us. So we had a pre-hike meeting with the group, and the guide that was going to be, he had mapped out our route for us, and we met at this hostel. We had a pre-hike meeting here. This is also where we started our hike the next morning. So all along the Appalachian Trail, there's a whole culture out there. It's fascinating. There are these hostels that are open all year long, and they really cater to the AT hikers. You can see the AT logo there on the front of the hostel, that white A&T. This is called Uncle Johnny's Hostel. They have everything for the camper. Gear, sleeping bags, tents, they really pack it all in. Food, Pepsi, cold drinks, and very important essentials like Band-Aids, bug spray, and a phone in case you have an emergency. They also provide shuttle service to the trailhead. So typically, and we did, people will park their car at one of these, they'll pay a small fee, leave their car at this hostel, get the shuttle to the trailhead, and then at the end of their hike, whether it's the entire trail or just a section, get another shuttle back to where their car has been left. So it's pretty well organized because of all these services along the trail. And if you were doing a through hike, this is the type of spot you would stop. You'd hop off of the trail, one that was close to the trail head or middle of the trail, to resupply, to get food. These places all have post offices in them. So really kind of a home away from home. So we had a pre-hike meeting there, which consisted of weighing our gear. The goal was to have a pack that weighed less than 40 pounds and to plan last minute, do a gear check. So the guide went through all of our packs with us to make sure we had all of the required safety essentials. We didn't have too much, and that, everything was packed in the bag so that it was going to be comfortable as we set out. So did the pre-hike meeting, and then the next morning we got out there, got the shuttle to the trailhead, started our hiking adventure. So the first day, here we are. We are looking fresh, we are showered, we are smiling. Notice the packs. So the packs were supposed to be 40 pounds max. We came with all of our supplies, but at that pre-hike meeting, we shared out the community gear. That included things not everyone had to carry, like the cooking gear, the stoves, the fuel, the food, the first aid kits. So when we added those on top of our already packed bags, some of the folks' bags were 45 pounds. Mine was 40. I weigh 105 pounds. So this is a significant amount of weight. And you really, I should say you don't have to be, the fittest person in the world, but you definitely do have to do some preparation before heading out. You can't just go out there and do it unless maybe you're Reese Witherspoon or you're 18 years old, neither of which I am. So there was definitely some training, some hiking on elevation prior to going out. Those of you who live in King County I work and live, might know Johnson's Mound. I went there on a daily basis, up and down Johnson's Mound, because it's the highest elevation in my area, 200 feet from top to bottom. Did it 10 times or so, and that was good preparation. And so if you go, make sure you prepare in some way yourself. So we started out, and that preparation was definitely required, because this was what we hit immediately. The first 100 feet of our journey was straight uphill. And you can see the grades were steep. And this was by no means the steepest climb that we were on. This was a baby. So right on up. One of the reasons I mentioned we chose this section was the biodiversity, but also this happened to be an area where there are many of what are called balds, where you had these panoramic vistas of where you were hiking. It's not like this on the whole Appalachian Trail. There are many segments that are called tunnels of trees, where you're just, you're hiking through this dark, covered area, and all you really see are more trees, in back of you and in front of you. So you don't get these vistas. This was nice to be able to have these sweeping views. It was beautiful. But there was work involved to get to the top of these balds. Again, steep. Some of the steep grades were graded and level and grassy. Others were very rocky like this. So, there was some footwork. You had to really be careful. Luckily, no one on our trip in our group was injured, but it would be pretty easy to slip on this type of terrain. And here's the first bald that we were able to summit, 5,800 feet. This bald top happened to be pretty close to the trailhead, hence the sign. There's really not much man-made additions to the Appalachian Trail. You really feel like you're in the wilderness most of the time. This was unusual. Here are more of us at the top. You can see we're above the clouds, and it was a feeling of real achievement. The Appalachian Trail, even though it is a wilderness trail and it doesn't have running water or, for the most part, latrines, it's well marked. It would be pretty difficult to get lost. So that's comforting. Even if you are out there by yourself, you need to take the proper precautions and have a map. Your GPS may or might not work at certain points on the trail, so map and compass skills are essential. But the trail is marked about every quarter mile with a white blaze, like the one you see on the left, and then the water sources, because you have to collect and filter your own water, are also marked. There's usually a water source near every campsite. Campsite's maybe not the right word, but you're only allowed to camp in certain areas. You can't just camp anywhere on the AT. And these blue blazes mark where the spur chute or the spur trail is to get to that water supply. So speaking of getting to water and, at night at the camp, most of the places that you would stop and camp are going to be just out in the open. A few of them, there are a few shelters that are basically three-sided lean-tos. There's a couple of hundred of those along the trail. And then there are a couple like this one that we had for our first overnight. It's called the Over Mountain Shelter, that look really glorious from a distance. Looks so cozy. And by AT standards, it is. But as you get closer, you can see it looks a little more sketchy. It's kind of falling down. And it's crowded. So while it's nice because it started to rain at this point, a shelter like this provides protection from the weather. If you think that being on the Appalachian Trail is going to be a total exercise in solitariness, you're wrong. You might be hiking all alone, and you may see very few people during the hiking time. But everywhere you stop, almost everywhere, you're going to be sleeping with other people, and most likely strangers. So if you're not comfortable with that, think twice about going. This particular shelter held 30 people, and it was raining, so the shelter was crowded. Every spot was taken. You can see all the packs, all the gear sitting around. This was relatively large, though, for a shelter, and all those people were able to sleep inside. But as you can imagine, a lot of smells and snoring and noise going on. So, but another benefit of this shelter was that it came with a room with a view. This is a pretty that looked out over beautiful mountain range. This is very unusual. It's the only one on the trail. Most were, we each had to have a spade and took care of waste that way. So most people took advantage of this, this little room with a view before leaving the next morning. While we were at the Over Mountain shelter, it was raining, it was a little miserable, but something happened. Magic happened. These 4 young people showed up and they performed what is called trail magic. There's all kinds of nicknames for people. There's trail names people have, and it's just a whole nother world out there. So trail magic was when something special happens, that people do something out of the blue for others that are hiking to make their trip more pleasurable, or just to surprise them with something fun and nice. These young folks brought, they lived nearby, so they just hiked in a couple of miles to the shelter, and they brought all of this food with them, and they cooked everyone that was in the shelter a little appetizer. They brought some beer, which is totally unusual. No one would have that because it's too heavy. You can't include that in a 40-pound pack. So they found some ramps, which are those green things in the pan. They had foraged those on the way, and they had baked potatoes. It was pretty magical on a rainy day to see them and their smiling faces and just the good cheer that they brought. So we partook of the magic. We opted to camp outside to escape the snoring and the smells in the Overland Mountain shelter. And it was raining, but in the morning, it was a glorious sunny day. You can see this was early May. The trees weren't leafed out yet, but it wasn't sunny for very long. You can see, again, this was not just our group. There were many people here at this campsite. But it started raining again, so we got to know what it was like to, you have to have rain gear. You've got to be prepared for rain because you're going to hit it. And we got our coats on and pack covers on to keep all of our supplies dry. And we started off for our first full day of hiking. And that's where we were going. Very tough day. This was our hardest day of hiking, not the longest, but the hardest. It was about 8 miles of hiking, and this was the day with the 2,000 feet elevation gain. This particular rise right here was 500 feet. So it was tough, but we were fresh, so that helped. So we headed on up, and since it was so difficult, I should say that our days typically consisted of 6 to 8 hours of hiking. We would usually hike for 2 hours and then pause for a rest to have some water, to have a snack, and we'd stop for lunch. So it wasn't just, a forced march. We tried to take in the scenery, and we were there to enjoy ourselves. But yeah, there was definitely a lot of hiking, as you would expect. One of the few man-made structures, again, other than some of the shelters, was this fence that was getting towards the top of what was called Big Hump. That's the name of that large rise we were hiking up. Very pretty. You can see it's a grassland up there on these balds, not a lot of trees. And finally, at the top for a hard-earned lunch. Lunch usually consisted of something cold. We never cooked at lunchtime. Cold, quick, easy. We were tired. Usually was something like salami, cheese, dried fruit, things like that. And then this particular day, most of the work was done before lunch. We were able finally to do a little bit downhill hiking, headed towards our campsite for the night. Most of the time, we didn't know where we were, which state we were in on the trail, except for right here, where someone kindly placed a sign saying AT, leaving North Carolina. So we knew we were going into Tennessee at this point. Our second night was very different from the first. We were the only group there. There was one other man that joined us, but pretty nice and quiet. This place called Dow Flats, and it was flat. It was, you could see the rise on either side, but we were in a valley. It was starting to green up, so the ground was nice and soft, just a really pleasant place to be after a long, hard hike. We had also, just like the trail magic folks had found for us, we were able to forage some ramps. We have ramps here. These are also known as wild leeks. They're a member of the onion family, and they're mighty tasty. Pretty good to chop up on dinner, which is what we did that evening. Every time we got to a site and we were getting ready for dinner, we needed a couple things. So dinner, we always cooked. It was always hot. And it was good. Another reason that I chose to go with the guide is he was a backcountry chef, and we ate well. We ate hot food for breakfast and dinner. Most of the cooking required water, so we did a lot of boiling over our cook stove. To do that, though, we had to get the water and we had to filter it. Everyone carried water in their packs that we had collected from the previous stop to do water filtration, but water is heavy. So most people carried 1 to 2 liters, and then we stocked up at the stopping spots for the evening. So those blue blazes marked the water location. It would either be a stream, a lake, sometimes just a puddle. And we'd collect it in a bag, and then we would sterilize it in one of several ways. Iodine tablets, a pumpable water filter or gravity-fed water filter with a micron-sized filter, micron pores in it, or a UV light. So multiple ways of doing it, or boiling. We typically used the water filtration pump. The other wilderness essential at each of our sites, as we got ready for bed, was a bear bag. So there are black bears in the Appalachians, no grizzlies, but you need to be careful when you're in bear country. Bears react to smells, and you need to put everything that has a smell, and that includes your food, garbage, toothpaste, deodorant, although most of us didn't even have that, in a bear bag that you then pull into a sturdy limb and secure for the evening. Nothing in your tent that has any odor. So we would set the bear bag location up while it was still light so we could see what we were doing, and then we would lower it and fill it with everything right before we went to bed. So that was kind of our like evening routine. And as I mentioned, we did not go hungry. We had so many good meals. Just a little glimpse here. This was not all the dehydrated food in packs. Now I've gone backpacking myself, and that's what I usually take. It's easy and it's fast and it's hot. But we didn't do that. We brought fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, tuna, and we had things. We had dessert. This is a rice pudding. We had soups. We had cornbread with a chili. Another stew that had chicken meat in it. It was actually in one of those tuna-like bags, and ramps on top. And for breakfast, we had a lot of powdered eggs that taste actually pretty good when they're rehydrated, with chunks of ham in them. All kinds of ethnic dishes. Just we really ate well. But what I really cared most about was that we had coffee, actual coffee, and I went and bought one of these after the trip. This little tiny pour over that you can make decent coffee with just hot water, and so good. Just a great way to start the day when you're getting up early, because I mentioned you don't really sleep in when you're on a backpacking trip. We were up with the sun and hitting the trail because we had a lot of miles to cover. So day 2, we were refreshed with that coffee, a good night's sleep, and well, actually full day 2, but this is day 3 of the trip. And we were ready for what was going to be our longest hike of the trip, almost 10 miles. Actually did end up being over 10 miles with a couple of explorations of some waterfalls that I'll show you in a minute. But we were ready. So this is our whole group. Right at the front is my stepdad, and he was the oldest member of the group. He was 71 at the time, and he did great. So anyone can do it, I think is the point. And so the age range was significant. The woman in back of Rick, my stepdad, the leader's daughter in her early 20s. So, you can see a combination of men and women of all ages, all walks of life. It's really a great equalizer to be out there with these, people from everywhere. And it's just really fun. Great way to make new friends. A lot of the trail was rocky. This section here in day 3 was a rhododendron rock climb. So all of those plants that you're seeing on either side here are rhododendrons, and this is supposed to be very spectacular when the flowers are in bloom. We were a little too early for that, unfortunately, but rhododendrons, like very dry, rocky soil like was found here. What really saved us on this part are those trekking poles. Without those, boy, it's really hard on the knees. In my opinion, it was more difficult going downhill than up. Hard on the knees, very hard on the feet. You know, your feet slide forward in your shoes when you're going downhill. This was blister day, a lot of blisters today. So we kept on. Even though we don't see too much man-made stuff on the AT, I showed that one fence and some of the shelters might look a little improved. Most of the time you're walking, you know, in wilderness. There are a few spots though where the trail crosses a major road. And this is one of them. US 19. And you can see these couple of campers are taking advantage. They may be through hikers, they're hitchhiking, they're getting a ride into town, probably to resupply. If you were gonna quit, this would be a good place to do it too. I have to admit that my stepdad did think about it because at this point he was very tired, but he hung in there. Unlike these two campers, he did not leave and he stuck with us. We kept on going and look at this, like lo and behold, we stuck with it. And this is why we went on the AT. Little sun, flat grade, flowering plants, beautiful mountain sky view in front of us, just lovely. This is the only one we found. You can forage on the trail. Wasn't worth a meal, but it was interesting to see this one little morel. Springtime is morel time, and we were there. Trail humor, there's a lot of it. And there were a lot of waterfalls on this section of the trail. This was Jones Fall. I don't know if you can see it, but right above that, worth it, go. And then below that said, you're a fool if you skip this. We didn't skip it, we went. That was our first waterfall. It's pretty. We got to night 3. The river that fed that waterfall is the Elk River. It's really the first major river that we saw. There are a lot of streams. This is a river that we probably wouldn't have attempted to cross. It was pretty wide and it was moving. Parts of it were pretty deep, but it was a great spot to camp. It had been a long day. Remember, this was our longest hike. It was a little over 10 miles in total with the trip to the waterfall. So we were tired. Every night ended it with a campfire and community meal and sharing of stories. This particular night ended with, most people had a little libation with them, not anything too heavy, mainly flasks of something or other. So we enjoyed that this evening before setting up all of our tents and going to bed. By day 4, we were really getting the hang of it. I think by then we were all feeling comfortable. We were quick to pack up in the morning. It only took us a half hour or so to tear down our tent, get our pack packed again, and clean up. Sure saved time to not have to shower or worry about how you looked. And this is a typical backpack with everything carabinered on, ready to go. Someone must have had 2 pairs of hiking boots. Well, we always had 2 pairs of shoes, either 2 pairs of hiking boots or 1 hiking boot and 1 camp shoe. You just never know. That's something that could easily break and you can't be without a pair of shoes. Another fall here is my friend Lisa, Mountaineer Falls. Beautiful day. Another scenic vista where we had stopped for lunch on day 4. And this is right near that spot. It was called Laurel Fork. This trail, great spot. And that bridge that you see there is nowhere near typical. Most of the bridges crossings included stepping on stones if you could, and trying to balance and not fall in, or just walking through the water. So this was a luxury. Surprise, day 5. We didn't see too much wildlife. We never saw a bear, but we did see this black rat snake one day on the trail, just sunning himself, minding his own business. And some more of that trail humor, hardcore cascades, hell yeah. And yeah, this was a great place to walk on over, take your shoes off, soak your feet in the ice cold water. Worth a stop, as was this. Here's one of the more typical shelters that people would spend the night in. Not like that Overland mountain shelter that I showed you, that old barn from the first night that held 30. These shelters are, either 1 or 3-sided. They sleep 6. They are not luxurious, as you can see. They're basically just a roof to protect you from wind and rain. They'll be full every night though, and you pretty much have to get there early to even get a spot. Nothing is reservable. It's first come, first serve. This is a good spot for us. We just stopped for lunch. This is our group. Just some people that we met there, the 2 on the left, had been journaling. So people read and journal. Some people bring musical instruments, but that's more to take, or play cards. But for the most part, after dinner, there's not a lot of nightlife on the trail. People go to bed. Interesting about these shelters though, people who stopped and visit would often leave, there'd be a notebook in there. And folks would have notes about what was coming up on the trail, like, be careful, something's going on. Or if you're planning to sleep in this shelter, warning, it's full of mice. And in this particular shelter was really luxurious. There was a whiteboard and a marker. And if you look closely, you can see these names on the board. Bub, Shaggy, Shadow, Ghost. No one goes by their own name on the AT. They have what are called trail names. And you don't make your own trail name. Someone assigns it to you. And usually you get your trail name while you're out on the trail. So we saw all these, and our guide, his name was Terry. He was a veteran of hiking. He had a trail name. Everyone else we met did, but we were newbies and we didn't. So Terry was going to give us each a trail name at the end of our hike. And I think it was a good source of conversation for us as we were hiking. I wonder what he's going to call Lisa, or what he's going to call Rick. So yeah, we were all curious to see what it was going to be. Our last night, night 5, just a beautiful setting. Sunny, we were all comfortable hiking by then. We probably could have done another 5 nights if we didn't have to get back to work and our families. This is the one, it was a wildlife night though. We didn't see a bear, but we did hear, as we were setting up our tents, we heard blood-curdling scream. A woman screamed on the trail, not very far away. And, we ran over there, and it turns out she had seen a bear just right there. And she did what you're supposed to do with a black bear, which is to look big, raise your arms, wave them around, and scream. So that's what she did. And the bear just went away. You really have to be careful if you run into a bear with a cub. This one wasn't. It was alone and really didn't want to bother her any more than she wanted to bother it. We also saw a snake, another snake here in someone's tent, which, I didn't see it, but she sure did. She freaked out and took her whole tent down and reset it up just so she was sure that the snake was not in there. And overnight, right, as we got into our tents, as the sun had set, we heard this. See if you know what this is. Those birders in the group will probably get it right away. And even those of you who aren't, you could probably guess, because the bird's name sounds like the call. Do you know it? Play another individual. The whippoorwill, which I've since heard here in King County. They're very unusual here in King County, but in this section of the United States, they're very common. And as beautiful as the call was, it was really exciting to hear it at first, like, oh, that's a whippoorwill. I had never heard one before, but I knew right away, as did everyone. But then it was not so exciting because that called all night long, and it was loud. It kept us up for a while until we just got used to it in the back of our mind. I mentioned it's a great place to make new friends. When we're with people through such hard hiking conditions and you're having meals with them every night, you really do get to know them well. And it's just such a feeling of camaraderie. We've kept in touch since then, and it's just a great way to meet like-minded people. Maybe not exactly like you, same age as you, or different jobs, but really wonderful friends that you make out there. Last day, again, we felt good. We felt like we were seasoned veterans. We had a short hike ahead of us, just 4 miles. We knew that, and yeah, we were ready. one last climb out of that, that final campsite. Wasn't that bad though. And we were rewarded finally, rhododendron in bloom in the lower elevations there. This is what we would have seen in that rhododendron tunnel if everything was in bloom at the same time. And back in civilization. Dennis Cove Road was the northern terminus at the end of our 50 miles. We hit the road and walked into a hostel, another hostel, where a couple of our cars had been left, and we were going to take those back then to where all the rest of our cars were, to the Uncle Johnny's. So, well, but we had to do one more stop. You know, a couple people said, you really need to drop your packs here, offload all that weight, and head on over to the last of the waterfalls, which is called Laurel Falls, named after the mountain laurel, which grows all around that area. And so we did, and it was worth the stop. But what was really worth it was to have that nice icy cold beer at the end. And we did, we all relaxed together, and we were waiting for, you know, what everyone had been thinking and talking about for so long, our trail name assignments. So our guide offered those up at this point, and he had really thought about them. He put a lot of effort into choosing trail names for us that we would like, that would be memorable, and that really captured the unique personalities behind everyone in the group. So for instance, my stepdad's Rick's, he had been wanting to go on the AT his whole life. It was on his bucket list. His trail name, bucket list. One of the women on the trip was a nurse in Aurora, and she really coached and helped Rick at the, you know, points when he was wanting to quit and give up. It was hard. And she just kept on coaching him and kept on getting him through it. And her trail name was Coach. So they were just all really appropriate. And I'll finish up just telling you what my trail name was. And I love it. Use it from now on. Next time I go out on one of these long distance backpacking trips, it related to the fact that I'm a naturalist, and it was nice for the group to be able to, even though some of the plants were different, I didn't know all of them. I knew quite a few, and the wildlife that we came across, which wasn't much, I was able to identify for people, and they appreciated that. So my trail name was Sensei, which kind of means teacher. So I liked it, it was appropriate, and it was a great trip. And so I'm gonna stop sharing now, get back here. Just, you know, I would definitely like to encourage those of you who may have thought about doing it to do it. You can train to do it. You can go with a guide your first time, so it's not so intimidating. Yeah. So that is the end of the presentation. If any of you have any questions and you'd like to enter them into the chat room, I would be happy to either go into detail or on something I touched on, or answer any questions. Has anyone been on the AT? No? Here's one question here. Did you learn anything about yourself through the hike? I guess I learned that I could do it. I mean, I was, I suppose, proud of myself that I stuck with it. And even though I didn't get to the point of my stepdad of wanting to quit, I certainly thought about, why did I come out here? So I learned that I could persevere and do something if I set my mind to it. I learned that I could go 6 days without taking a shower. I didn't know if that was going to go over well, and there was no problem at all. Another question, did you stop for food or carry it at all for 6 days? That's a good question. We carried it all, which is one reason that our packs were so heavy. For a shorter trip like that, 6 days, that's not a problem. If you were through hiking, what those folks do is they'll take enough food typically for 3 to 6 days, and then they'll hop off the trail at one of those hostels and they'll resupply. So they'll either buy the food there, or they will have packages shipped to them from home, like their mom or their spouse will send them a box, because each of those hostels has a little post office in it, and then they'll resupply it from their box. Or if they really want to treat, they might go out to, Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's. So it depends on how long you're out there. We carried all of our food and just enough water for the day. Question, why did you choose spring, a rainy time? Couple reasons. From a work standpoint, that worked best for me. Even though it was a little rainy, it wasn't cold. Okay, so there's temperature and there's moisture, and it wasn't buggy. All right, later in the summer, the mosquitoes and the black flies get to be pretty bad. So it's kind of like you have to pick your poison. You can dress for the rain. We had rain gear. We had pack covers. The tents were waterproof. So I think I felt better putting up with rain than I would have with biting flies. That would have been more of a problem for me. Let's see. Sorry, missed most. Someone is asking, will you put this up to watch again? Yeah, I'm recording this, Sandy, and I'm going to post the videotape on the Forest Preserve's YouTube and Facebook pages by tomorrow. So you can watch it at your leisure. All right. Where was everyone from? All over. So me and my stepdad, well, actually, I was from Illinois and the guide was from Illinois. My stepdad had moved there in Florida now. My friend Lisa was from Austin, Texas. One of the guys with us was from Georgia. The nurse was from Aurora, and one of the others was from Rockford. So half from Illinois and half from all over the US. No one from outside the US in our group, but we ran into a lot of languages on the trail. I mean, it's a pretty famous hiking trail throughout the world. So it attracts just a lot of nationalities to come here and hike the Appalachian Trail. Anything else? No. All right. Well, thanks for joining me, everybody. The recording, like I said, will be available. Those of you who didn't get to see the whole thing, or if you want to go back and look at one of the maps, go ahead and do so. Thanks for joining me. Hope you get out there and experience the trail yourself. Bye now.